Hey, Christina. Good to see you.
How are you?
Good.
So good to I just ran into you today at
Yeah.
Celebration Title. What a coincidence.
How about that?
I know.
Thank you.
It's almost like we planned it.
Yeah.
All right, John Weaver is an amazing inspector that I was with Cornerstone Building Analysis.
That's it. Yeah, it's a mouthful.
That's right. It's still early in the morning.
It is.
I need another
There's
cup of
coffee.
Yes, I'm definitely going to be taking him into some iced coffee. Okay, Cornerstone Building Analysis?
Yes.
Okay, and how long have you been doing it? It's been a minute.
It's been a minute. A long minute. 20 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
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 It shows.
Wow. Yeah, I've got the gray hair to prove it.
Yeah. Yes, and like we were saying before, I know chickens. I keep asking you to give me a chicken.
Yeah.
Because in your spare time,
We've
have
got chickens.
animals and
Yeah,
chickens.
that's my wife. She had a whole off-grid urban homestead, gardening, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And it's the fancy chickens. They have like a little feather,
They look,
fringe situation.
Gourmet's the wrong word. That's what I think. Yeah. Anyway.
I'm telling you, one of these days, I'm in a condo right now, so I don't think my cats would like the chicken running around in there. It might be a little messy. Yeah. I have to talk to the association, see if they'll let us have some community chickens. But you've been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah, loving it.
And we met because I had a buyer that had hired you. I think you knew their parents.
I honestly
I know, it's been several years. But I remember, they were like, oh, this inspector. And I was so impressed because you came, you did the inspection of the house. It was a pretty good house. It was pretty straightforward. It was a newer home. But you were like, you sat down and it was a couple that was buying their first home.
I remember that. Yeah, she
think
was
they were
sitting on the couch
engaged.
or whatever, and she was really kind of nervous and whatnot.
But you just kind of give the information and, you don't sugarcoat it, but you're not, you just kind of give the facts in like a calm way so people can kind of really understand what's going on.
Right.
I was just impressed with, how thorough the report was and the details and that you had the patience and
Try not to scare people over silly stuff. Some inspectors kind of go over the top with that, and attorneys help write the software. And when you read the reports nowadays, it can be pretty intimidating and scary.
Yeah, some of the language.
That's a bedside manner. It's like going to the doctor and maybe they don't have such great news. They try to deliver that as politically correct and gently as possible because in relativity, everything can be fixed. It's just a matter of the price point, and I don't necessarily know that as the inspector. Do you want to do it?
Right.
So that could be a great bargaining chip. Fixer-uppers, the deals are still out there, and
some people love them. It's not for me unless I was like doing an investment. But it's like you said, you gave her all the information and you sat with her and you answered all of her questions, and you make yourself available to people.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
that. So
and with first-time buyers, a lot of times it's the fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
So spending time to let them vent, they just want to know. And if they, and if they don't know, people jump to conclusions. So taking that time with people, that's something that we've always done.
Yeah. So I wanted to chat with you about historic homes because we've had the pleasure of and I do a lot with that, like downtown, Winter Park.
Yep. College Park.
Yeah, College Park.
Even, Yep.
And it's so fun because they have the historic homes. And I guess what would you consider historic? At what age do you think it starts being considered historic?
Oh, I don't know, 5 years old. In Florida, you go some places in the nation and historic is like historic, really, really old. But Central Florida, you find stuff built in the 60s or 50s or maybe still around in the 40s or 30s or whatnot, but downtown or that kind of thing. But
I feel like we've had a couple of those.
Yeah. Frame with crawl space. For the insurance industry's perspective, historic is really about 20 years, 25 years or older, which seems kind of silly, but from an insurance perspective, that's kind of where they're coming from. Right. Yeah. See? But typically like the 50s. So historic homes, love them. I flipped one that was 1954, 56 or something like that. And when we redid it down in Winter Haven, down in Polk County, and when we redid the kitchen, and it's just like, really, guys, when we started taking it apart, the amount, I've been in attics on those homes where the framing crew has signed the trusses. People took pride in their work back then, you know, and over-engineered stuff. Now, technology was what it was, the materials they used and that kind of thing, but it was, historic homes were built when there was pride. Not to say that there isn't now, but assembly line production is different.
Mm-hmm.
And so
you see the detail, you see the craftsmanship,
and
like plaster. Is that
plaster is like a stucco.
Mm-hmm.
You won't find plaster walls anywhere, but something maybe built in the 50s.
It has a charm to it.
It does.
Mm-hmm.
It does. So things to look for in a historic home, things to consider are the bones. Not so much cosmetics. I mean, if you're looking for a turnkey historic house, then that's a little different. But the roof, the HVAC system, the electric, the plumbing, some of the materials that they used back in the day may still be there in a historic house that hasn't been renovated, and there could be some problems with some of that stuff.
We had a house downtown that was, did it have a fuse box? Did it have? Do you remember if it had 2 fuses or 4? It was like that was instead of an electrical panel, and that's not uncommon, right?
That's what they had. That was the technology of the day. So fuses in general, bad. Breakers, good, and then we moved into a little newer, some of the breaker panel brands that they used back in the day. Federal Pacific, being one, Sylvania Zinsko a little later.
So these are 2 that insurance companies don't like because they're prone to. They've been known in the past, in some cases, to
have problems. We'll leave it at problems. It can get scary. The insurance industry has the statistics, the documentation from all the claims paid way back, and unfortunately, there have been some bad situations with some of these brands. Yeah,
so they're not making those anymore.
No, they're gone, out of business. Kind of like historic cars.
Yeah, so if somebody has like a Federal Pacific box or Sylvania Zinsko, and they see that, and so when I'm showing a property, like the one that we just closed over in Winter Park, gorgeous little property.
Mid-century ranch.
Yeah, so cute, very charming, and the lot sizes on the historic homes are so nice. But I remember, that's what I look for. I look for those types of things. If I'm walking through, you can kind of spot some of these things. If you see a Sylvania Zinsko or a Federal Pacific, you're probably going to have to replace that. The insurance company is not going to like that. But you can kind of look when you're walking through, or you're going to point it out in the inspection. And just say, hey, FYI.
Absolutely.
And then the other problem that we were seeing in the houses that had, I guess it's not necessarily a problem, but like you said, we were talking about this before we came on, the insurance companies have those statistics.
Right.
Somebody had a problem with it somewhere to where they said, okay, we've paid out many claims on this. We don't want to keep paying out claims. The cloth wiring, right? So the older homes will have cloth wiring, or the fuse boxes, or what other electrical stuff.
Well, the electric may not be grounded.
Okay.
So you're not going to have GFIs in the kitchen, wet areas, kitchens, bathrooms, things like that.
Yeah.
With historic homes, you're also looking for what repairs or renovations have been done over the years and were they done properly.
Right.
So somebody kind of come in and done something that wasn't quite really done up to standards or whatnot. Plumbing can be an issue. Steel pipes, galvanized steel pipes, cast iron waste lines.
Okay.
Again, clay waste line, believe it or not.
And why are those issues?
Well, because then they were fine when they put them in.
Right.
But now here we are, a long time later, and the product is beginning to break down and fail. So you buy a house and you're expecting the plumbing to work for a long time, and it could be really at the verge of failing at any given second.
And polybutylene too, that's a
polybutylene
common one that we see here.
Yes.
When did they use poly? What was the kind of the heyday for that?
Well, poly started in probably back in the 80s in mobile homes, that kind of stuff. It made its way into single family homes in the early 90s to the mid 90s. And when they had a class action lawsuit and that company lost, that product was shut down. So typically 95.
Okay. Was it because they had, I think I've heard that, that they were prone to sort of pinhole leaks and then the whole system would kind of...
Well, it was multiple failures. That the product is a flexible plastic product instead of like PVC that's a rigid, hard plastic. This poly, you can bend it around trusses or studs or whatever. And then they make the connections with a ring, crimp it tight. So there's no glue, there's no soldering, anything like that. So initially the problems began with the rings. The rings were failing.
Okay.
So pipes were literally coming apart inside of walls and that kind of thing.
And people didn't necessarily know right away.
No. Well, the pipe breaks in the wall. I mean, you've got a major water issue happening. But then
a friend of mine had that issue in College Park.
Yeah.
Again, a historic home. And I don't know if it was poly per se.
There you go. So that would have been a historic home that didn't start with poly.
Yeah.
Somebody would have come along in the 90s and replumbed a portion or all of the house with poly, and here we are, much later.
Yeah, they had a leak and then it was starting to come through into the house. And so, now they started to notice that they started to have issues with mold, so they're having to do mold remediation and replace the floors because it just wasn't discovered right away. So insurance companies, they would prefer not to have that. So, and I think, what is it, if I'm doing a walkthrough, or if a buyer's looking at a house, they can look, you can sometimes see it, right? Like if you're looking at underneath the sink.
Yeah, you look under the sink or at the toilet or whatnot.
Gray?
It's a dark, like a battleship gray.
Okay,
Dark
and that's
gray.
the color of the pipe.
Yes.
Okay, so if you're seeing like that
You gotta be
gray,
careful because people paint over them. So you look and it's white, you think it's PVC or whatever, you know, so.
And that's one of the things you look for.
Yes, we're checking for that
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. Okay.
So polybutylene pipes, so it's a gray pipe on historic homes. Cloth wire is going to be hard for you to see unless you take an electrical panel apart, and I wouldn't recommend you do that unless you know what you're doing. But the brands of the electrical panel are Federal Pacific and Sylvania Zinska. And then beyond that, I mean, you can have us come in and we'd be happy to check it for you and make sure you don't have any of that or other stuff that could be expensive, you know, things that you didn't anticipate as far as renovation and rehab.
Always good to have you come through or any inspector just come through and look for all those things. So I guess the common problems are you're looking for, you know, the electric might be outdated. You want to look at that, consider updating that. Look for the Sylvanias and the Federal Pacific. Look to see what type of piping it is. Polybutylene would have been a redo at some point, but look for that gray pipe. What are some other common
age
things
of the roof, age of the roof, age of the HVAC system, the air conditioning and heat. Back in the 50s, you know, it might be a buried oil tank on the property. See that from time to time where they had it originally. There was no air conditioning in the house, and they had an oil burning furnace for heat. So you know those tanks are supposed to be drained and emptied when they're abandoned. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't.
I know we dealt with that at some point. I know that we had something like that.
It comes up. So we let you know if there's a tank. We're not going to check to see if there's oil in the tank. That would be a different contractor to do that. But
that's the thing. You're going to take a comprehensive, and that's the important thing. You know, people it's important to know. Some people, you know, I always tell everybody to get an inspection. Some people may not want to. So get an inspection. You just need to know what are you dealing with, and then you can make the decision: do I want to repair this? Do I not want to repair this?
That's right. So, and factor that into the cost of doing business on the house. So what's your purchase point and the appreciation curve, and what are you going to have to put into it to make it the way you want, and just you don't want to be upside down.
Anything else that people should look for if they're buying a historic home?
There are other things. Might be hard for the casual buyer. I mean, we're going to look for some environmental problems, asbestos insulation.
I had a friend buy actually a real Victorian property, and they didn't discover that.
Yep,
until
later. Siding.
Asbestos. So asbestos siding. What's the common? How do people usually address that? I know it's not.
Well, there's a couple ways to address it. I mean, you can go actually into an asbestos abatement, have it basically renovated by a company that's licensed to do that. It can be covered, you know, but you need to know that it's there, and if you were ever to disturb it.
So they can't just start ripping it open. That's not.
If you don't disturb it, if this were asbestos siding and you don't disturb it, you're okay. It's not off gassing, you're not inhaling it. But now all of a sudden you decide I want to put a window or a doorway here. We're going to rip through this. Have a contractor do that. Now as they cut, all of that is airborne, and you could be breathing it or absorbed through.
Which is why you want to get somebody that's licensed,
you want to know,
experienced. But that's something that you would identify.
If we can see it.
Yeah.
You know, we know what to look for that. If we can see it, if materials will be covered.
Out of curiosity, how would you?
It's kind of hard to describe it. You know, there's some trends that you know what it would have looked like. You know, especially exterior. Yeah. And that's what you're paying an inspector for is not so much their time. It's 20 years of experience of we know what we're looking at and what we're looking for. What should be there, what shouldn't be there.
Right.
You know, and then counsel you on that. You know, and factor that into the cost of doing business on that product. Yeah.
All right. So, I mean, anything else that people should look for when they're buying a historic home, or just be prepared to possibly address it?
I think just be prepared that this stuff may come up. You might walk through and cosmetically and layout, and I mean, again, the size of the lot, the trees, mature landscaping, this kind of stuff. You kind of get wowed by all of that, and you should. There's nothing wrong with that. But just in the back of your head, know that some of these other things may come up, and that could affect your bottom line on the price point.
It's not necessarily bad. It's just
no, it's not.
This is how they did it back in the day.
Yes.
Be prepared to bring it back, up to date.
That's right. And how long are you going to be there? You know, are you going to flip this product? You know, and in which case you got to watch what you're going to put into it, or are you going to be planning on being there for a long time? Well, then you definitely want to make sure everything is right the way you want it to be, and it's not going to be a as is flip or that kind of thing. And you're going to need to bring some people in to address some of this stuff if it's there. So hire somebody to tell you yes or no.
Awesome.